Why do we all recoil when we hear a story about a policeman who uses his badge to bully the public, or a boss who exploits her employees? Why does it bother us so much when a parent is known to abuse his children, or a man who forces himself on a woman, or a celebrity who leverages his fame for sexual favors, or a priest who uses his position to harm children? Not to mention corrupt judges, or human traffickers, political demagogues, or spiritual leaders on a power trip. I mean, why such a visceral reaction to these things? Well, I think it's because it sets up a scenario where it's not a fair fight. It's power over powerlessness, strength over weakness. And it may be physical strength, or social privilege, or political power, or economic advantage. It's all the same. It stinks because it's abuse of power. And this passage in James that we're about to read is all about that. We've been looking at what James has to say about justice: social justice, racial justice, justice in the community, justice in the government, in the courts, justice in the church lobby. But listen to these verses in chapter 2, starting with verse 5. Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor. Is it not the rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? Are they not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name of him to whom you belong? You know, I know that it almost sounds like he's up on the poor and down on the rich. I mean, remember, Jesus said it was hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom. It's not impossible, but it's hard. Obviously, because he's got his needs met. I mean, he says, what do I need God for? I mean, I've got Visa, I've got MasterCharge, and I've got American Express to take care of me. But as for God choosing the poor over the rich, I talked about that last time. Remember, God is partial to the poor in the same way that firefighters don't spend equal time at every house. They're partial to the homes that are on fire. And James says the rich exploit the poor by dragging them into court. Unlike the poor, the rich can bribe the judge. They can hire Johnny Cochran to defend them. Not to say that all wealthy people abuse their power this way. I mean, obviously that's not true. It's not that the rich are inherently more evil than the poor, but they do have more means and opportunity to hurt more people without even, breaking a sweat. Nor is it to say that the poor don't sin, but this particular sin doesn't usually happen among the poor since they don't have the capital to win court cases. Of course, not all the rich oppress the poor. There are a lot of wealthy people who appreciate their success, and they leverage it for the good of the many, for the common good. But historically, a large portion of the poor got that way by depriving the poor, directly or indirectly, in one way or another. And because the poor are easy targets, because they have no power to resist. I mean, think about it. Smart muggers don't pick Navy SEALs as targets. They choose the weakest mark. Justice, think about justice. It's the right use of power, privilege, or position. So therefore, abusing whatever power, privilege, or position we have over other people perverts justice. There's a Christian organization, International Justice Mission, that says that injustice is what happens when someone uses their power to take from someone else the good things that God intended them to have: their life, their liberty, their dignity, or the fruit of their love or their labor. So when we use our privilege and power to get things at the expense of our neighbor who needs them more than we do, we're sinning against them and against God. Like I said, there are hundreds of ways to abuse power or privilege, not just financially, not just socially, politically, spiritually. But you've dishonored the poor, James says, when you've treated them with disrespect. You didn't acknowledge their inherent dignity of the poor man, and treat him like you treated him like a second-class citizen, which is, I mean, if you think about it, that's a non sequitur, since there's only one class. There's not a second class. There's only one class before God. I mean, James says, is it not the rich who are exploiting you and dragging you into court? I mean, it sounds like James was talking about something that was going on in Jerusalem at the time. But this goes on, all over the place all the time. There's nothing new under the sun. We see it every day in the news. And this term exploiting is used, for instance, in Acts chapter 10 for the oppression of the devil. One version translates this, isn't it the rich who grind you down? And in the prophets, Amos says, hear this, you who trample the needy and do away with the poor of the land. Jeremiah speaks of oppressing the foreigner and the fatherless or the widow. Ezekiel refers to those who oppress the poor and the needy. See, riches of the rich give them that power to do so if they choose. And we all know what power does. It corrupts. Riches put the rich in a position of power for good or for evil. I mean, wealthy people and nations can be greedy or generous with their economic power. Then James says, are they not, like the rich bullies, he says, are these people not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name of him to whom you belong? I mean, he's saying not only do they dishonor the poor, but they blaspheme God. Now, blasphemy is a pretty strong term. I mean, what is blasphemous behavior? Ask any number of Christians that question, and you'll probably get a list of behaviors like fornication or gay sex or cussing God out. But in this case, what he calls blasphemy is discrimination against the poor. Those who oppress the poor and hoard their riches and its perks, they defame the name, the noble name of God. It's as though they spit on God's name. Now, that's not a very good place to pause, but for time's sake, next time we're gonna pick it up at the next verse that says, you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, quote, love your neighbor as yourself, you're doing right. So it's the royal law, this love your neighbor as yourself. It's royal because it comes from royalty. It comes from the king himself as a royal edict. And we can ill afford to dismiss or minimize a royal law. Love your neighbor, brothers and sisters. Love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. Let it sink in, and let it happen at all costs. See you next time.